there. I have been around a long time. I have many stories. I have been there and done that and enjoyed myself along the way. The joys, challenges, struggles, and triumphs that we all have experienced through our lives are a bond that we have in common with every generation. Sharing the commonalities of our life experiences brings us closer to every generation that is open to hearing from us. Hey, you out there, get ready. Join me and many others. Our host is John Knox.
Greetings, I am John Knox. This is Sharing Life. This is Season 4, Episode number 10. This episode is called Andrew Urbanowicz, Remembering the Warsaw Uprising. Support for Sharing Life comes from APIC Marketing. To consult their services, go to apicmarketing.com. By email, contact asha@apicmarketing.com.
APIC Marketing, your resource for digital marketing, web, and app development tools.
In this episode, we will learn about Andrew's childhood, his role in the Warsaw Uprising, post-war education, his spiritual life, forgiveness and reconciliation, and the cost of bravery, that is, his living with PTSD for many years. As the episode comes to a close, Andrew will read in Flanders Fields, which will be followed by 1 minute of silence. The minute of silence will end with a bugler playing The Last Post. How was your day?
My day was pretty good. I was teaching 2 students, so I'm happy.
Oh, beautiful. And what were you teaching them?
English. English as the second language.
Beautiful. So I'm John Knox. This is Andrew Urbanowicz. This is the Sharing Life podcast. We are doing a Remembrance Day episode. So, Andrew, where were you living when World War II started?
So when World War II started, I was living in suburbs of Warsaw, Poland. So it was 20 kilometers east of Warsaw, a little suburb called Sulejówek.
Does that suburb hold a significance to Poland? Are there historic things that have happened there?
Not really, but there was one of the World War I heroes living there, Marshal Piłsudski. When World War II started, I was 12 years old. So I was actually in a boarding school, and I couldn't participate in any war effort. But at the age of 15, I finished the school, and I started looking how to join the resistance movement. So I joined the resistance movement at the age of 16.
Wow, that's so young. How many missions did you complete before you were caught by the Germans?
In the underground movement, I was actually half a year only before the fighting started. And during this time, I was mostly trained. So the only mission that I participated in was carrying guns across the city, because the guns were hidden at various points, and in anticipation of the fight, they have to be brought over to points where troops will gather. So I was involved in a mission of carrying guns to their location. Now that was very dangerous, because if caught, you would be in big trouble.
So how were you caught by the Germans?
Well, I took part in Warsaw Uprising. So after I joined the resistance movement, half a year later, Russian troops were coming to Warsaw. They were approaching Warsaw. And in order to help the Russians to take the city without too much damage, the Polish resistance movement staged an uprising to get the Germans out of Warsaw. Unfortunately, the Russians stopped by the river and they never helped us. So the Germans had the next 2 months to finish us. So we were completely done because there was no way we could escape. So in the end, Warsaw capitulated, and whatever was left, because there were 250,000 people died in 6 weeks, 8 weeks actually. And out of my company of 250,000 people died in 6 weeks, 8 weeks actually.
Support for Sharing Life comes from APIC Marketing. To consult their services, go to apicmarketing.com. By email, contact asha@apicmarketing.com.
Life.
How long were you a prisoner of war for?
8 months, and the war ended. So in May 1945, all the fighting stopped. And that was the end of my prison term.
And what was it like being a prisoner of war?
It was very miserable because there was hunger, there were infestation of bugs, and there was cold because we were in the middle of the winter, very poorly dressed. So it was most miserable time of my life.
Yeah.
So there was hunger and there was misery. But we were not treated badly. The Germans respected. There were different camps in Germany. There were concentration camps, there were labor camps, and there were prisoner of war camps. So of all those camps, prisoner of war camps were the best treatment. So when I was prisoner of war, we were next to Americans and the French and the Russians. In a prisoner of war camp, there were different sections in which different nationalities were kept. And the Americans, mostly the pilots who were shot down, they were next to us. And then there were the French and the Russians, and there were English somewhere else in the camp.
I understand that you have suffered from PTSD for a number of years. Can you tell me what caused your PTSD?
I think it's the shock, the things you see, the dead and the wounded, all that has a very bad effect on you. And so I had anger. I was very angry. I was very difficult to be with. And it took me, I don't know how many years, but eventually I overcame it. I didn't know it was PTSD, but now I know. But the war affected me quite badly.
So this is the cost of bravery. This is the cost of standing up against evil, is the emotional scars that you had to face.
Fortunately, I've been brought up by the Christian brothers. I was in a residential school and I've been deeply religious. And that helped me a lot during the fighting because I constantly prayed because I was always aware that I could die any minute.
Mm.
Because there was bombing, there were all kinds of dangers. And you still had to function in those conditions. You couldn't just hide. You had to do your job.
How did praying help you?
But it kept my mind off the, being afraid. It kept me. I never been afraid to die, but I was afraid to be wounded because the hospital conditions were horrible. Most treatment would be amputation. So it was very bad. People were lying on the streets. They were begging for water. There was no nurses, not enough nurses to help. So it was very miserable for those who were wounded. So I prayed, Lord, I don't mind dying, but don't let me be wounded.
What's it like to not be able to move on from your emotional experiences of the war?
Well, in the end, you have to leave it behind you because it will kill you. So you have to move to future, right? You cannot live in the past. So, but it's a very difficult transition period because of all the memories and so on. But eventually, I went on with my life. I got scholarship, got to university, and eventually worked and so on. So, yes, in spite of all the memories, you have to go on. And I did.
It can be very hard to move on. I understand this is a milestone many of us have difficulties with.
Fortunately, after the war, I wasn't settled because after the war, the Germans transferred us prisoner of war to Switzerland. Now, Switzerland wanted us to send us to Poland, and we were considered enemies by the Russians. So I had to escape from Switzerland, which I did, crossing the mountains, getting to Italy. And in Italy, I joined the Polish forces. The Polish forces came from Africa, and they conquered, along the Allies, they conquered Italy. They took part in Monte Cassino, Battle of Monte Cassino. I joined them after the war, actually half a year after the war. And I was able to go to school, an army school, preparing me for civilian life.
Oh, wow. And that was in Italy?
In Italy. And afterward, the British moved us to England. And in England, I spent 11 years. And I was fortunate enough to go to university, finish university. So God was blessing me.
We're going to ask you about your spiritual life a bit later. We have 6 questions concerning the underpinnings of your emotional life and then the spiritual life. It seems like the war was very emotionally difficult for you.
It was. You know what upset me a lot was the injustice of it all. Because on one side there were Germans killing us, and on the other side there were the Russians doing nothing about it. They were just across the river. So it was everything but justice. It was all wrong. And so that was upsetting me.
This is the first time I've heard such a personal report of the war. It sounds like your childhood was also difficult from previous conversations. What would you like to share about that now?
So my childhood, when I was born, my parents were actually having difficulties. They wanted to divorce. And here I am, a newborn. Eventually they divorced when I was 3 years old. So I was in the middle of a family feud. And after the age of 3, we lived with the grandparents, parents of my mother. So at the age of 10, I was given to the residential school run by the Christian brothers, Catholic brothers. And I spent the next 6 years there. Now, to me, being separated from family for 6 years was very, very trying. So it was a very, very unfortunate childhood for me. So there was no peace in my life. Mm. So eventually I got out of this school, and then I joined the underground army, and the story picks up as I went to war.
How did experiencing the war at age 16 and 17 affect the outlook on your life?
It made me seek justice and peace. So it became an obsession for me to be opposed to injustice. And that, in a way, led me to God. Because I wanted peace, and I've seen so much injustice. So that only made me stronger believer, right?
Mm-hmm. How did your being a Christian affect your decisions while you were in the Polish resistance?
I think God was leading me. I had a strong conviction that that's what God wanted me to do. And it turned, because, when I was 15, my mother died. And so I was an orphan already. And I prayed to God, God help, what will become of me? And God somehow answered this question. So he took care through that decision of joining resistance movement. For the next 10 years, I was in the army, and God took care of me. Mm-hmm. And I got education, everything. So I feel that God was blessing me all the way. So I had a good relationship with God.
How did you feel when you abandoned your spiritual life?
So what happened, actually at the age of 25, I did some bad things that I know God didn't want me to do. And God stopped connecting with me. He didn't answer my prayers. And that's eventually how I came to conclusion there is no God, because I lost that contact with God. And so for the next 40 years, I had no contact with God. But in the middle of that period of time, I started looking for a solution to my problem. I was dealing with this warm memories and so on, and I had to get rid of it. So I read books and everything, and nothing really helped. Until at the age of 60, my daughter gave me the Bible. And when I started reading it, and I read it 4 times from first to last page. I read it 4 times, and I attended groups, studying groups, and so on. I came to conclusion that it's the truth. And then the recovery took place. Somehow I connected back with God.
How did having Jesus in your life change things for you?
Well, I got peace in my life. So that was very visible change, because before I was, torn with different emotions. But after that decision, I got peace. Those things didn't matter anymore. I think it cured it completely. It was gone. I don't have it anymore. Well, when I accepted Christ, at the same time I retired. So I became a free agent. I had time, and I could put my energy into doing other things. So a lot of pressure went off, and at the same time, my wife died at this time. So it kind of changed everything. And so I dedicated my life to serving God. I went on missions. I went to Poland on missions 4 times. I was teaching the Bible and English language in family camps. So I was doing what I could. I was active in my church. I was teaching the Bible. So I was, and like now I'm teaching ESL. So I've been doing what I can to help people. Mostly through living, through your example.
Mm-hmm.
You live a Christian life, right? And you have to say why you are what you are. You have to read Bible. You have to talk about Bible. You have to share those things. You don't push religion, but you share.
Right.
See, everybody is entitled to their own beliefs, but you should be vocal about your beliefs. But most of it are examples, of what miracles happened in your life. So I wrote a book about my life, and in it there are about 10 miracles where I was going to die, and I somehow survived. One example is I was in Austria as a prisoner of war, and I was put on a firing squad, and I was going to be shot. There were 3 of us, and the soldier shot the bullets. I looked over my body, where am I bleeding, but they used blanks. It was a scare tactic. But I didn't know it. I thought I'm dying. So I was 10 times in situations where I was convinced that I'm going to die, but God somehow saved me. Once I was in a building, I was standing guard, and 3 bombs fell, and the whole building collapsed. And I was able to crawl out of it alive. So another example. And there were 10 of them.
And I understand your helpful nature even went to reconciliation with German soldiers.
Well, when the war ended, that was, I think, 5th of May 1945, we were in a camp in Alps, very close to the Swiss border. I was in prison in Austria. And when the war ended, we prisoners shook hands with our German guards, and we said, the war is over, all that is forgotten, now we'll be friends. But there was another thing which happened. I met my future wife, and she was a German. And I had to wrestle with something. I hated Germans, right? So in order to marry her, I had to leave my hate behind. So I said to myself, hate will destroy me. I have to forgive.
What did our friend Chaplain Tom do for you at the seniors' home?
At Remembrance Day would present me and a German, and we shook hands and forgave each other once again. You see, you fight because there is a war, but after the war you have to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
You can't carry the hate forever because it will destroy you. In Flanders Fields. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark out place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, fell down, so sunset glow. Laughed and were laughed, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands withdraw. The torch be yours, behold it high. If you have faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
You have been listening to Sharing Life. To contact me, use my email address sharinglifestudios@gmail.com. Also, I have an independent board who reviews all decisions concerning these broadcasts. Thank you for being a listener.